Podcasting worldwide from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome back to the Personal Process Podcast. The show that takes you through the growth, hardship, self-discovery, lessons, and stories of individuals who achieved success in their own personal path. Trust the process.
Welcome back to another episode of the Personal Process Podcast. Today's episode, we got Dr. Carl Rabun. He told us to call him just by Carl because he's very humble, and we're very excited to have an amazing individual on our show. And we're going to talk about a lot of things that, in my opinion, are super important. Soft skills. We're going to talk about MBTI, and we're going to be talking about diversity and how to make the world a better place. So, with that said, Carl, is there anything that I missed or anything that you'd like to include in addition to that?
No, great to be with you today, Carl.
Awesome. So thank you very much for being here, Carl. I'm just wondering, these statements that you're mentioning, the communication skills and all that, it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. So do you mind kind of taking us back in time? What led to this? Tell us a little bit about your past and how this kind of went about.
Well, I just over my career, I know some people would call it a blessing. Some people would say, wow, you job hopped a lot, but I've been in a few different careers. I started in retail, and my very first job was pulling shopping carts at if you have a Costco up in Vancouver. Before Costco, it was Price Club, and so in high school I was pulling shopping carts out in Price Club. Right. So if you see those folks out there and in all the weather pulling those shopping carts, making sure everyone has them, just remember, I have most respect for them, and every time I see them, I try to be as nice as possible to them. But doing that, working my way through college, working in retail, selling appliances at Sears, which is almost no longer existent, right?
Yeah.
I've worked at a group home. I've worked in human services. I've worked for the federal government. I worked at an Air Force base running youth programs for the United States Air Force at Edwards Air Force Base. I've worked as a case manager for Kern County Department of Human Services here in California, and their welfare to work side. And then for the last 15 years, I've been a trainer traveling up and down the state, training other human service professionals for UC Davis, which is one of the University of California schools here, and also Sacramento State University here for the last 5 years, training state employees. And the one thing that just stands out more than anything else is the ability to make sure that we communicate, and we communicate clearly with each other. And there's so many roadblocks to being able to effectively communicate. And a lot of times it just has to do with ourselves and what we expect and what we think is important. And the important thing to remember is just because we think something's important, or it's part of our history, part of our makeup and our experience, the other person sitting right across from me may not share that experience, may not have a clue how I've lived or what I've been through. And I may have the same issue. I always say in every class, yesterday I said it twice in 2 classes, we're a fingerprint. Every one of us, we're a fingerprint. Even if we have the same MyersBriggs type, or we have the same disc letter, or, the same temperament, that doesn't make, someone a cookie cutter of somebody else. We shouldn't always expect everyone to react to everything in different ways, because we all, unless we grew up in the same city, in the same neighborhood, on the same street, and even in the same house, right? We may not have a different view. We may not have the same view of the world. And
absolutely,
even brothers and sisters and cousins can tell you, there's always that one black sheep in the family, that one that stands out. But, we all were raised together, but,
that one was different.
Were you sleeping outside or something? Right? You have such a diversity of people, and everybody has their own special difference, and that's, so I really try to work with that and everything that I talk about. And I've been spending a lot of time these last 9 months doing classes and seminars on mindfulness, right? And having a growth mindset, and also working on implicit bias, right? And being an anti-racist practice. And then also, mixing that in with, communication skills and what we bring to the table is so important. And it's so important for us to express to other people.
It definitely is, Carl. And, I should have asked you, what haven't you done in life? Because you just went through a whole spectrum of everything. I love it. And, Carl, this is a very exciting talk for me because I think we're going to be talking about a lot of skills that I value personally a lot. But I feel, I'm not sure if you can concur, but a lot of people don't understand the value of, the soft skills of understanding the biases people have. And, as you mentioned, like, even if you're in the same environment, there can be so many differences that happen between individuals. So my question to you, before we even get down to the details of how to do this in our life, is when did you personally become aware of these soft skills and the importance of it? Is there a time you can tell us an experience?
I've always been. I think it's just my personality. MyersBriggs, I'm an ISFP, right? One of the things that I didn't know this until I took my very first MyersBriggs test when I was 40 years old, right? But
Wow.
there's always been some inherent feeling of trying to make sure that the impact that I was trying to um, provide somebody else was met by them, that they received it, right? So, I mean, even as a kid, I hate to call myself a people pleaser, but until I realized, that I had to stand up for myself, I very much was a people pleaser, and I was always looking for how people responded to me and what they were looking for from me, and what were the right things to do to make other people smile or feel positive being around me. I've always, felt good in interviews,
Mm.
job interviews and things like that. Of course, there's been interviews I haven't gotten, but I've always just tried to make sure that I'm paying attention to that person that I'm with and making sure that I'm picking up cues and seeing what they're responding to, what they're not. I don't know. I think it's my personality. It wasn't a book I read when I was a kid or anything. I didn't read How to Win Friends and Influence People until I was much older, right? But
Great book.
yeah, right. Yeah. So but it's just something that I've always tried to be attuned to how other people are feeling. I guess, probably 11 or 12
11 or 12.
and I'll say I was 11 or 12 is the first time I ever got
Your butt kicked.
my butt kicked.
Oh,
And,
man.
and I think that was an awakening.
Mm.
Because I was always bigger than kids growing up. I was always taller and I was just bigger. I mean, I was a big kid. And so most of my friends weren't as big as me, and so I didn't know exactly what to do with it. So I would just bulge my way through things. Hey, barge my way through. Let's do this. Follow me. Let's go. Come on, guys,
Yeah.
listen to me. And I never had anybody challenge me
Right.
on that um, until I think I was 11, and I
Yeah.
had one of my friends say, "No, we don't have to do what you want to do just because you want to do it." And he stood right in front of me, and it really made me think, okay, well, wow, okay, well, there's something wrong with that guy. No. but then, but then I had a friend at school who, we used to roughhouse, and I tried to physically get him to do what I wanted, and he put me up against the wall, and he said, "I'm not going to do what you asked me to do." And it's one of those. I don't know if you have those things that you remember as a kid, those seminal
Sure.
moments. It's one of those moments where I realized I'm not going to just be able to barge my way and bully my way through life.
Mm.
There's got to be a better way to win friends and influence people, right? So, how do I use myself in the best way and really try to get people to want to follow me rather than dragging them along? So, if you said that's really a place where my idea of the world changed, my idea of who I am and what I wanted to be and who I was to other people changed.
That,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And that's really huge, and it's a very young age. Keep in mind, 12 is, what is that? The fifth grade, sixth grade, something around there.
seventh grade, yeah,
Seventh grade,
yeah, yeah.
and I don't know about you, Carl, but I can even say till today, I'm mid-20s and I still have so much to learn. I'm amazed at how much progress I've made since those years. And to have that experience come up, it's really, first of all, it's interesting that you got that experience from it, because a lot of people would have just maybe took it to another level and be like, "Oh, you're not listening to me. Let
Yeah.
me try harder." But you took a moment to reflect, and I think that reflection just gave you a lot of insight, and it went to the communication skills. So, we're talking about how to analyze situations and get the other person to understand us and to maybe not use influence in a very negative way that it has some connotations to, but to see us from the best light and for us to show us the value and understand them in the ways that they want to be understood. So with that said, Carl, can you give us some insight on that level? What are some things that people can take away from conversations, from, interviews, networking that will better their life? What are like your top 3 tips? And this is on the spot, so no pressure at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, first is to recognize we're all fingerprints, right? So we all are unique, even if we think something's worked with somebody, not the first 99 people, that 100th person may not respond. And it's something I had to learn early in my career as a seminar facilitator, trainer. There are some groups that are talkative and they're laughing and they're having a great time face to face or virtually, right? And then there's some groups who are just stone facing you and they're just sitting there. And it's something I had to realize. When it first happened, I said, "Oh my God, am I doing this right? Am I being who I want to be? Am I getting my message across?" And then I got the responses back and evaluation. This was a great class and I learned so much. And what I realized is very often those classes that are very quiet, they might be packed with introverts, but also if they're paying attention, very often people will be quiet and not want to interject all the time. And sometimes the noisiest groups and the ones that are more interactive are where I'm going to get more feedback. Like, yeah, I wish you would have said this, or I wish you would have said that a little more. Right. And so it was a bit of a
learning
conundrum
moment
for me. Yeah. And it was the opposite of what the expectation was. So I had to realize that, you're not always going to reach everyone in the same exact way. Right. So everyone's a fingerprint. The second thing that, a lot of us were taught things at a young age. And, if you believe, Freudian psychology, everything you learn from the time you're born to you're 11 or 12 makes up who you are, right?
Oh, yeah.
Jung says most of your personality is genetic, but that early in childhood interactions with people that you love or care about or respect, and, whether it's a parent or a teacher or a grandparent or a pastor, or a coach, somebody else like that, those lessons that we learn and the life experiences we have at that age are what we bring out into the world. And so the important thing that a lot of people learn are the ideas of respect, right? And the ideas of the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated, do unto others, biblical thing. So the second thing that I always say is, the golden rule is great. And it's a great tool to teach young people how to be respectful and be polite and be kind. But when you're an adult, it doesn't always work. The platinum rule is what really works. And maybe the platinum rule. Have you ever heard of the platinum rule?
I have not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's been some commercials and stuff, so I feel like it's been watered down. But the platinum rule, where the golden rule is treat people the way you want to be treated, the platinum rule is to treat people the way they want to be treated.
Bam.
And so, how do we do that? And it's really important to be intentional. Some of us don't have to be intentional. When we're in a conversation, we're looking to get other people's responses.
Right.
We're really trying to hear them and try to get as deep as possible. I mean, with the podcast, I'm sure, and I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and you let the guest do most of the speaking, which so you're right on track. You'd be a great coach, right? That 85-15 rule.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Carl.
Yeah, no problem. But being a good listener and paying attention, being present in the moment when you're having that conversation with somebody is not only the best way to learn insights about that person, but it's the best way to build that relationship. And the better relationship you have with somebody else, the more information they're going to share with you. Now, there's sometimes we don't want all the information, right? But there's some jobs and some times in life where, we need to be there for people that we care about and our loved ones. And sometimes the problem is underneath the surface or it hasn't been expressed. And sometimes people just need someone to be able to vent to. And so, the third thing is just to be a good listener, to really be that person that listens to hear, listens to comprehend rather than listening to respond.
That's
right?
huge.
Yeah, because we do so much of the listening to respond these days. If you see every conversation, I call it verbal ping pong. I say something, you say something, I say something, you say something. And then while you're talking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. And so I'm just taking a part of what you're going to say, and then I'm going to go off on my own. And then, okay, well, you're doing that. Well, I'm going to go off on my own too. And the next thing you know,
what are we even talking about?
What are we even talking about? What did we learn? Did we get anything out of this? And are we going to go to that person again to have that type of conversation?
Yeah.
Right. So having that person that truly hears you, I think it's so valuable. I think there's many more people who listen to respond rather than listen to comprehend. If you can listen to comprehend, you can be that person that you want to be for other people. That being said, it's not always easy, right? Half of us, if you believe Jung and Myers-Briggs and everything, about half of us are people focused, where we're thinking about other folks and trying to use empathy and compassion, right? And the other half of us are process focused, where we're focused on completing the tasks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah.
So Carl, sorry, you had a lot of value here. I just wanted to kind of break some things down. So first of all, with regards to the platinum rule, I've never heard of it, but it's so true. And kind of just going back to How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Yeah. It's funny because, I actually use that one principle of listening to people, and I used it deliberately on one of these individuals who was my acquaintance. I didn't really know him well, but Carl, I swear to God, I just listened to him and I'm just like, yeah. And I was genuinely interested. It was such a cool story that he was telling us. At the end of it, I didn't even say a word. Do you know what he replied? Man, that was the best conversation that I had in my life. And this isn't someone that I'm super close with. This was someone that I kind of, met in the library, talked for a little bit, friends of friends. And he said that. And ever since, like, we've been such good friends, connected on such a deep, intimate level, and just talked about life. And that was one of the things that I think the book was mentioned. It's saying that if you want to be a good I can't even say it right now. If you want to be good at conversing,
conversationalist, yes.
There you go. Love it. Thank you, Carl. Just listen, because you can't just talk. If you talk, people don't want to listen to you, and realistically, I think people just want to talk about themselves, which is what you were mentioning, Carl, which had a lot of value. Now, before we go into discussing what Carl Jung has done for psychology and your, take on it, in addition to what the MBTI is, because I think, a lot of people do know about it, but there is also a huge segment that don't even know what it is. I just want to talk to you, Carl, about one thing in specific that you mentioned for, I believe it was Rule 2. You mentioned that, people learn things up until the age of 12, and that kind of carries them forward without, if they don't reflect on it and adequately take action. Now, a lot of individuals have had an amazing childhood that have gone forward, and, they've taken a lot of good lessons, such as the golden rule, and maybe even, if they're lucky enough, the platinum rule. But there are others who have not had the best childhood and had maybe a harsher upbringing. How can they go forward and correct these mistakes if they want to, get the most out of their life and attain fulfillment, as I hope most people like to in this podcast?
Well, yeah. So I really think it's important to do a lot of examination of yourself, and it's not always easy to do. I mean, I can, just a throwaway line I always tell people, I didn't know what I wanted to be until growing up until I was 29 years old.
29.
And what happened when I was 29 is I made peace with my father. And it wasn't anything overtly he did. He wasn't around. My parents split up when I was 3. And we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in San Francisco and just down the peninsula in San Bruno, which is across the freeway from the San Francisco airport. And so he was in the area until I was 9, and then he moved to Los Angeles, which is 6.5-hour drive away, for his work. And
right,
it was something that maybe where I would see him every weekend, or every couple weekends a month, to a couple times a year.
Wow.
And it was not only that, it wasn't my father was really gracious when he talked about my mom and my family and things like that. But the challenge was it wasn't reciprocated. And so, I wouldn't get a whole lot of positive reinforcement and positive thoughts about my father from I was raised by 3 women, my mom and both my grandmothers, and
right,
they weren't very happy with the fact that he left his only son, his only child,
right,
and went down for work. Although, the older I get, the more I realize what he had to do what he had to do. But
yeah,
there was some resentment, and I had a feeling like he owed me things, and
right,
I felt entitled, and I mean, my mom. She did the best she could. She was a single mom. She was a great single mom. She made good money, and or decent money, and I had a pretty good childhood. I mean, I got to do some things. I sang in the San Francisco Boys Chorus and traveled the world and sang for the Queen of England and did a bunch of cool things like that. And then,
That's not too
you know,
shabby.
no, I could, like I'm saying, who am I to complain about my childhood, right? But,
Yeah.
and then I played baseball and I did well, and, and I played a little bit in college and things like that. So, I mean, I had those things going for me. I had some esteem, and that was an important thing, is esteem, right? Having a high regard for yourself. And as a kid, sometimes you have to manufacture that, right?
Right.
So it's so I understand that feeling of resentment or hurt, and I even went and lived with my father when I was 20. I lived with him for 3 years, and we solidified our relationship, and it was a lot better. There were some bumpy things. I mean, when I first moved down there, I got kicked out maybe 3 or 4 times in the first 6
Wow.
months. Yeah, well, because my mom kind of let me get away with some things that my dad said, no, this is not what's going to happen in my house. Well, unfortunately, I was 21 years old, but when he's trying to lay down the law, like
It's a little bit too late.
right. So,
Yeah.
but we came to an understanding, and it took a few years, but I mean, we were really tight now. He's my best friend. But I remember,
Beautiful.
yeah, when I was 29, we were sitting there on his birthday, and we're sitting around and just watching TV and drinking cognac, and he,
Nice.
yeah, and I brought up something about my childhood, and he said, he goes, I don't know how to say this to you, but I love you, and you're my best friend. But if you want me to keep apologizing to you for your childhood, I don't know how much longer I can do that and how many more times I can do that. And I don't know if we're going to be able to have the type of relationship that we both want with each other.
Wow.
And I was upset, because I was a little entitled, right? It's kind of like
Sure.
when that kid pushed me up and jacked me up and said, "No, I'm not going to do what you said." All of a sudden, I had that pushback, and it's like, whoa, that's not what I was looking for, right? And then I had to think about what I was looking for. What really was I looking for from that conversation? And was it just going over ground we've already covered? And so I went back to work on that Monday, and I worked, at the Air Force Base. And one of my friends, she ran the family advocacy center there, and she's also a licensed clinical social worker. So she sat down and we talked about it, and she said, "Well, do you think your dad had a point?" And I said, when I talked to him, I didn't. But on the drive home and that Sunday, I realized he might have a point. How much longer am I going to hold this over his head? Right. And, I mean, yeah, he's apologized. He tried to make amends. He's tried to be, he's a great grandfather and all this other, my dad is not without his flaws. I mean, there's things that we all have in our lives that I'm
Everyone.
sure we don't, but it was something where I had to realize, if I was in his shoes and I tried to make amends for the millionth time and it kept getting thrown back in my face, how would I feel about interacting with that person? Right. And
Yeah.
that can be a real challenge.
It really can, Carl. Are you familiar with classical conditioning?
I've heard the term. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially classical conditioning, the main example that they give is Pavlov and his dog, where they
Yes.
ring the
Oh yeah.
bell
Yeah.
and then like the
He
food, so then the
salivates.
bell
Yeah.
gets paired with the food.
Right.
Now, the theory that I have is when and why I think your father may have said that. First of all, that's such an amazing thing to say. He's just like, to be honest, like I love you, but like
Mhm.
I honestly can't do this. It's a very mature insight to have, and I think that's awesome. First of all, like I have a lot of respect for that, and I also have a lot of respect for you for like actually going back and detaching from the self-esteem and the ego and just being like, you know what? No, he does have a point, and he's here for me now. Now, just to come back quickly to this classical conditioning thing, when a lot of people are negative or they always take and don't reciprocate, I honestly believe that the negative emotions get paired with that person. So then
Mhm.
next time when that person comes to us, we'll feel that negativity. And even if we don't want to, and we know that they want to do something bad, it's just like etched in,
Sure.
and what's that? There's this other thing. I can't think of the exact formula, but in psychology, essentially the first thing and then the last thing are like the most
Oh,
important. Certain,
recency and
yeah, recency primacy
yeah,
effect.
primacy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So, like I think that's kind of what led to the hard part about you giving it up, because in the first part of your life, that's what you felt, and like even in the latter part, like he's trying to make up for it, but that's still there. And
Yeah.
there are huge salient events are going to have more weight, but those primacy and recency, the later and the first events that happen are what you're going to remember. And I think both of you guys just sat down and like had a deep intimate conversation that changed. So like let me ask you more on a personal note, because I've heard from friends and I've heard from so many individuals that, I'm going to quote, I hate my parents. I can't live with them. I am so resentful. They ruined my life. And, sure, I do not disagree that there are very terrible parents out there, but I'm going to go out and assume that there are some that, it's just, like you mentioned, a communication. And wow, that's a great segue to go into the next topic, a communication issue. So I guess, what can you advise people that have gone through similar experiences like you, Carl, that they can go out and forge that great connection back after a rough start?
Ask yourself what you need. What is
Mm,
it that you need from this person to be able to move forward? And it's something that, I've found, I've been, I mean, we could go down different rabbit holes, but I've been a single dad since my daughter was 5 years old. She's now 19. And so I had full physical custody of my daughter, for the last 14 years. So accountability is so important when you're having that conversation. Okay, so what is it I that I'm responsible for? What am I not responsible for? But also, what is it that, I can really look at myself and say, okay, well, I made that mistake, or this is something that I want to correct and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And when you're angry, when you're in the grip, when you're holding all that resentment and harboring I mean, it really stifles your creativity and your ability to think about yourself in a larger scale. What is my place in the world? Where am I going to go? You're stuck in that hole where this is who I am. This is who's keeping me here, and I'm not going to be able to move until I don't know what, and so I really had to think about it was a great thing that my friend talked to me about. What is it that you want from you and your father's relationship? I said, well, I want us to have a good relationship and a working relationship. I want us to, to be best friends, and I want to, stop resenting him. She goes, well, why are you resenting him? I said, for what, him leaving me as a child. I said, okay, well, have we already made amends on that? And I said, well, he said he's tried. She goes, did you hear him? And I honestly don't remember those things, those times that maybe he's tried to make amends. And I had to really think about it. And he told me, yeah, I did. And I had to think about it. I'm not listening. There's a stat, a fact that is in a lot of my communication classes that I live by. And it says that it's hardest to listen to those that we're closest to.
hmm.
We have the hardest time using communication and listening skills with those people that we're closest to. And I have a theory, and I believe that is because when we are engaged with those people that we care about, we use emotional thinking a lot more, right? Our limbic system is activated, right? And so because we have a lot of that emotional thinking going on, it's very hard to activate the rational part of our brain. And when we are in our emotional selves, we can be super happy, we can be super sad, we can be super angry, or all those emotions, they come to the fore rather than what is actually happening. What is that
Yeah.
person saying, and what does that mean? That usually happens on the drive home for me, or the next
Oh, yeah.
day for me, right? So,
And then you think that, maybe that was a little bit harsh.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Carl, I know you're gonna give us a lot more value, but there's already so much that we have to dissect here.
Mhm.
So, you're mentioning that you need to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think, first of all, that's something that I want to kind of go down deeper a little bit, because I feel that for nowadays, a lot of people have that entitled perspective. And,
Mhm.
not everyone. There's a lot of individuals who don't. But
Right.
I'm not sure if it's because of social media. I'm not sure if it's because of, I don't know, a new generation and participation medals, like the regular saying is saying. But how does one, break off from that I deserve everything and go into a realm of, okay, you know what? I have a responsibility to act as a good son. I have a responsibility to, you're teaching individuals now, so you have a responsibility to make an amazing class for people. How do you break apart from the thing that you just deserve something? Because that's something that I'm very passionate about, helping others, because I believe that when you have and take responsibility, not only will you enjoy your life more, but you'll make the world a more understanding and better place. And I think inspiring. And I think that's one of the messages that we wanted to talk about today. So, Carl,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. So, I mean, just having that idea of, I can make a difference. And, my main value, when anybody asks me, what's your main value? What do what's your purpose in life? And it's to make a difference. That's what I want to do. But to be able to make a difference, I have to be able to be accountable to myself, to recognize the actions that I take, the words that I say, they have repercussions, right? Whether it's a positive repercussion or a negative repercussion. So to constantly be aware of that, and like I said, maybe it's just my personality where that FI dominant, thing in Myers-Briggs is, I'm thinking about that other person first, and things that I'm saying are that way. But even folks who aren't people, they're more process focused. You can intentionally do it, right? And you can plan to have those conversations where, I want to listen. I want to hear what this person said. I also know that there's sometimes that this person I'm interacting with may come with excuses. They may come with anger. They may come with frustration. They may be aggressive in their communication styles. And that might challenge me, especially your fight or flight mechanism, right? And my
Absolutely.
fight mechanism, I grew up, in San Francisco, rode the buses by myself since I was 8 years old. So my fight
Wow.
mechanism is at 11, right? I'm always ready to up at a hair trigger. I have this big keychain, and my wife's like, "Why do you have such a big keychain?" I thought when I was a kid, I had a big keychain, so I had something to swing.
Yeah.
So, and not that I had to swing them a lot, but you always were prepared.
You got to
You always were
prepare.
alert. Yeah, sure. So, just think about that conditioning as a kid and how it plays out now. And so recognizing that is something, my first response, a lot of people, your first response is the right response. My first response is emotional.
Mm.
And if I allow that first response to be the right response for me, then that may not be the appropriate response for the situation, right? So when I'm, and you see it in the political spectrum and in people wearing masks and all the other things that are
Yeah.
happening, when
Yeah.
you see somebody who's doing something that you just think is reprehensible and sometimes morally wrong, not just, but I mean, thinking about other folks, it's something where I have to really take a deep breath and think about, okay, so what is the situation? So
Yeah.
really having that perspective, recognizing, the responsibility is in the way that you can regulate your response. So recognize when you're in your emotional center and how to get back to the rational center.
Absolutely. And Carl, let's dive in a little bit deeper because we kind of talked about the emotional center, kind of a little bit focus on the fight. But there's a lot of individuals who kind of, focus on the flight. And when I say that, let's talk about in a business setting where you had a lot of experience coaching and all that kind of stuff. I haven't had the same experiences coaching businesses, but I've done some speaking events where I'm trying to help individuals who are in senior homes and community centers and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I noticed that a lot of people kind of say, we'll just throw it to the side. It's not that important. Exercise, whatever. And I'm sure in a business setting, same thing, like, that person, he doesn't really do something like that, or, that task is not too important. We'll throw it to the side. How can we counter this mindset? And should we counter this mindset, Carl?
The mindset of
So the mindset of, just pushing things to the sides because they're so
okay,
stressful. Like, for example, this client's, causing a lot of our clients to leave because he wants super priority and all this. Just, I can't think of many more examples like this, but do you
mhm.
understand what I'm trying to go for?
Yeah, just brushing things aside because they're not that important,
Yeah.
right? And like I mean, I hate to be a broken record, but I have things that are important to me, and I
Mm-hmm.
have things that are deal breakers and are things that are non-negotiable for me. But I also have some flexibility, and I understand where that is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of folks, and really, but I also have things that I procrastinate on, that I push away, and there's things that cause me mental or physical anguish, right? Tony Robbins says procrastination is the delay of pain, right? So,
Wow.
you know,
That's a quote.
yeah. So rather than dealing with this, let's just push it aside. If it's not going to be a big um, money drain, or if it's not going to affect our bottom line, then we'll just deal with it later. And so, I understand that there's some things that I don't want to necessarily deal with. There's some corners I'd like to be able to cut, but because I've been doing this, and working with people in soft skills, most of my classes are soft skill related. it's really helped me to realize that just because I think something's important or not important doesn't mean that that other person feels the same way, right?
That's beautiful.
And then I have topics like active listening and SMART goals that we talk about, and it always amazes me how many people have not heard of active listening or SMART goals. And I've been teaching them for 20 years, and I've been talking with all these different people, and there's thousands of people that have been in classes with me and presentations and keynotes and everything. But there's most of the classes that I'm in, you get a few people that have raised their hand that said they've been in an active listening training or have understood SMART goals. So I can't give it a short shrift because it's important in part of the entire theory of listening and goal setting, right? And so just because it's something I've done a million times, it goes back to Joe DiMaggio. Do you know who Joe DiMaggio, the famous
I don't
baseball
know.
player? So Joe DiMaggio was a famous baseball player, grew up in San Francisco, and
Shout out.
but he's one of the most famous Yankees of all time, Hall of Famer. And he was getting towards the end of his career, and his knees were torn up and his shoulder, and so he had ice everywhere and just looked like he'd been through 15 rounds every game, right? And
Wow.
one of the press announcers asked him, said, "Well, Joe, how do you do it? How do you do it how do you give your 100% every time?" And he said, "Because there might be a kid out there who's never seen me play before." And that's something I think about a lot. There's somebody out there who has not heard those things that I say, 100 times a year in these different classes that I teach or keynotes. So I'm not going to downplay it. I'm not going to dismiss it. If there's something that has some type of impact or effect on the people that I'm working with or the organization, we need to look at it. Even if we look at it and decide a minute later that it really doesn't have any effect, right? But we need to take a look at it. You never know who you're going to affect in a negative way or a positive way by introducing something that you think is just not that important or something that you think everyone should know.
Absolutely.
Right? Common sense is not common.
It's only common to you.
That's right.
I love it, Carl. And I think that same quote was similarly produced by, I don't know if it was Kobe or Michael, but he was mentioning that, I show up to every single game and give it 100% because they're paying fans and they're out there to look for me. And I don't think it's only just for, telling something that they don't know. I think even by leading by example, Carl, if you bring up active listening and you're actually doing it, you can inspire people. I had one English professor in university where honestly, like, he just listened, he took notes, and like, I've never felt so important in my life. And that moments will always remain in my head, and the impact you can make on an individual by being your authentic self and expressing these things. And you should do it every single day, because you don't know what that in person that you're talking to is going through right now, and you don't know if you change their life, how they're going to change others. And that's the thing that I keep trying to stress for this podcast, Carl. Like, every single action isn't just one action; it's a network effect. It's the positivity.
Effect. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I can't even put it into words. You don't even if it doesn't come back to you, you know that you made a definitive mark in the planet and all that kind of jazz. So, Carl, I kind of want to switch it up a little bit. Still talking about communication, but I want to kind of change our gears now, specifically to MBTIs and just your experience with them. And if you don't mind just giving a little introduction for individuals who don't know what it is.
So MBTI is the MyersBriggs typology indicator, right? So it was created by a mother-daughter team, right? Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. They followed the work of Carl Jung. They developed Myers-Briggs in the mid-30s. They were studying it. They marketed it to different organizations. The military used it to place soldiers and troops into units during World War II. The government also used it to place women into those typical male roles like shipbuilding, bomb building. Maybe you've heard of the Rosie the Riveter. Have you ever seen the poster with the woman with the bandana going like this?
Yeah.
So women played a huge role in shipbuilding, ammunitions building, truck building during the war effort, while how many men were overseas in Europe. So when the war was over, they came back and went out in the private sector. And so Myers-Briggs has been used. I read a stat the other day of the Forbes 100 or the Fortune 100, 89 organizations out of the Fortune 100 use Myers-Briggs in some sort.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's it's not the first of the personality indexes. Jung fostered a lot of the personality theory industry that you see today, with Myers-Briggs
Mhm.
and true colors and temperament theory and, what was my Disney character? There's some, Match.com and eHarmony used algorithms that are similar from Myers-Briggs and whatnot. But the
Mhm.
oldest is the DISC, which maybe you've heard of the DISC
Disc.
profile.
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so it's a similar, it's a personality profile, but it's a workplace behavior profile, and that was actually created by a guy named William Marston, who was the developer of Wonder Woman. So,
Wow.
but yeah, so Myers-Briggs has been used for 85 years. It's about 75% accuracy. Last time I checked, they're always
Wow.
updating the assessment, and really, it's pretty cool considering that the assessment is your interpretation of word pairs and what's appropriate, right? So to have that type of accuracy is pretty cool. And they're really working on it. They're always evolving. The best thing that I get out of Myers-Briggs is to recognize that other people have different ways of going about their lives
Hmm.
and making decisions, right? Well, I keep going back to common sense. What I just think is something that everyone probably already done before, or probably already known, or some people not so much, right? And so, rather than and before I got certified, and I was whenever I give somebody instruction, I've been a boss and been manager for 10 years, or just even a team leader, whatever. I tell people this is what I want. If you could bring it back, and be great. And it comes back, and it's nothing like
You wanted.
I wanted. It's totally opposite of what I asked for. My first thought, maybe a lot of people's first thoughts, are what's wrong with that person? Or what's wrong with me? What did I do to did I give them the clear instructions that they need, right?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
what's going on? So there was something wrong, right? It
Yeah.
was either that person or me. So what I realized after Myers-Briggs is, it may not necessarily be something wrong. It may be that I didn't connect with them based off of the way that they like to be connected with and
Hmm.
communicated with. So it really has allowed me to be more open to different folks. And like I said, I've always been kind of a people person, but it wasn't until I got, acquainted and started studying Myers-Briggs more, that it really allowed me to have a better understanding and a better feeling about people and how they do what they do and why they do what they do.
That's huge. And just to share a personal anecdote. So I took this little class or course in university. It was called the Passport to Leadership program. And the second level of it, we were fortunate enough to do an MBTI and like form our groups into whoever fit into which category. And it was very interesting. There was a question asked to draw a map from one Starbucks on campus to the next Starbucks on campus. And one group that I didn't fit into drew like a very linear map, black and
Mhm.
white. Our group, oh man, we had landmarks, we had colors, we had like drawings,
Yeah.
terrible drawings. But it really just opened my brain up to wow, like so many individuals experience life differently, and the MBTI is, it just crazy because
Yeah.
you really aren't able to understand people at that level. I'm sure
Mhm.
even if you ask that colleague when you ask them to do something, they brought something back, they may not even be able to say like why they didn't comprehend it.
Sure.
But kind of tying that back into the responsibility factor, that was a very important lesson that I think you just shared with us, Carl. It's not what's wrong with him. It's you brought it into like what's wrong with the way I said it. And then you took responsibility onto how can I make it better in the future? And, I think that's a huge point because a lot of people have had bad bosses, quote unquote, and they tell you to do something. You don't do it to their liking, even though you honestly tried your best. And then you feel crushed and that may cause you to quit. And then that person may just be like that. But ultimately, it's all these soft skills. So, a lot of people put soft skills down, but honestly, soft skills are what lead people to such high success. And I honestly think that if an individual masters soft skills, I don't want to say an increase in double in income, but you can definitively get better results at work. You can get better results in your relationships with friends. You can connect at a better level. And really, I don't even know, Carl, like, go ahead.
It opens doors and creates opportunities that you wouldn't have had before. That's that's as far as I want to take it that way.
Sure.
Double your income, great. Yeah. But so if that's a possibility, if that really is something that you pay attention to or that you want to focus on, that's
Absolutely.
great. There's a lot of us who are naturally compassionate and empathetic with folks that have to remember that at the end of the day, it's still a business.
Mm,
And we can't give away the business, and we have to make decisions based off of what's best for the organization,
for
even
sure.
if it causes us stress and strain and consternation. I think there's a happy medium there, and I think it's
For sure.
something that people can meet, where they can marry their skills, whether they're inherent or not, of process and people.
Hmm.
And when we're able to put those together, I really enjoy folks if that have two letters in the middle of their four letters, NT. It's the exact opposite of me, right?
Yeah.
But what I like about those folks is that they are very process oriented. They're always looking to build a better mousetrap and to connect things. They like blueprints and org charts and flow charts. They want to see connections to things. They want to see where the bottlenecks are, who I need to speak to, who's there. They like that, and it's a graphical representation of what it is you're talking to. And sometimes you don't have to give them too many words. Okay, well, this is what we're here. Do you get that? Oh yeah, I'm on it. Don't worry about it. All right,
Yeah.
I'm gone. And then you have the rest of us, maybe 60-70% of us who, if you give us instruction, we need linear step by step, one,
Hmm.
two, three, A1, A2, B2, right? We need
Hmm.
that, and it frustrates the other folks who are like, well, just give it to me and I'll bring you back exactly what you want, right? And so that group of folks, they're ingenious in that way. But one thing that they can do is they can step on toes because they're so focused on improving the situation. They don't realize that in the spirit of improvement, they're being blunt and direct. And there's a whole lot of us who, when we hear something blunt and direct, we get our feelings hurt, right?
Hmm.
But I'm one of them. I like when people have taken time to connect to create that relationship. And then once we have a relationship and I know that you're there not to beat me down, but you're there to help build me up, you can say pretty much anything you want to me, right? But it's important for us to establish a relationship. So when I tell folks that, yeah, you know what, don't, if you're process based, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Learning those soft skills, learning those people skills will open you up to being able to be heard better and also to hear better. And like I said, the more information we can share, the better we're going to be at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think with that being said, being heard and having differences leads us to a very nice segue into diversity and privilege, Carl. So, would you mind sharing us your experiences and I guess what your goals are with those two factors?
Yeah. So, I've growing up in a diverse area like the San Francisco Bay Area, uh, there's opportunities to be who I am. I'm a biracial child. My dad's black, my mom's German, Irish, and Indian. My dad, is family from Haiti and also from the South, right? And just, so there's a lot of different, just, a mixture. And so one of the cool things about growing up in the Bay Area was there was a lot of people who looked like me. And and I get mistaken for Hispanic all the time. People want to take my last name and say Rabun or Rabun, right? And I've gotten two jobs because they thought I spoke Spanish. And
There you go.
yeah, so and they tried to give me the Spanish speaking case, and I'm like, I took it for 4 years, but I still can't speak it very well.
No hablo
Oh,
español.
yeah. And I said, well, what would make you think that I speak Spanish? And you're right. So, anyways, so um, just having that perspective, I really was able to experience a lot of diversity and just celebrate. And a ton of my friends, I mean, some of my best friends are, one of them is Norwegian and Mexican.
Wow.
My best friend in high school was El Salvadorian and Japanese by way of Peru, right? And then I have tons of friends that are Guatemalan or El Salvadorian from Argentina and from Italy, and so these are, and of course, some folks that are African American, right? So we just had this huge group of friends that I was able to mingle with, and it really wasn't until I got older when I moved down to Southern California that I really understood that there are lines that some places you cannot cross, and it never really was something that I thought about much growing up where I grew up. But in the Bay Area, you could experience that too, but I never really understood it until I was older. But I just
Mhm.
was I was exposed to so many different cultures and diversity. And so it's always been something for me to have a better understanding of each other. And that's really where I go to when we talk about things such as diversity and having that idea of where does bias come from? And
Mm.
bias comes from those things that we learn at a young age, right? Bias is something that we prefer based off of our experience and what we feel comfortable with. And so, you know, telling somebody, please and thank you, or sir and ma'am. I grew up saying sir and ma'am, right? And that's how you greet people. I greet people that are younger than me that way. I get in trouble with that sometimes. I'm not as old as you are, blah blah blah, right? So, but just understanding that those things that are important to me, are to have that emotional response. Right. I
Mm.
have an emotional response. An example, and this may frustrate some of your younger folks around, but I have a hard time with people when I see them sagging their pants. Right,
Mm.
guys sagging their pants. Right, and it was something that I'd always have a negative reaction to, and to this day I still have a right. But what I realized in thinking about it was that it would affect the level of service I was providing to my customers if I judged them based off of how they wear their pants.
Sure.
And so I had to think about where that came from. And I remember my dad when I was like 11 or 12, and two guys walked by with their pants sagging and the big white shirts like you wear in prison, right? And, cussing and everything. And my dad turned around and looked at me and he said three words to me. He said, if you ever.
Yep.
So I'm 11, 12. That's ingrained in my head. 20 years later, I'm training folks that are on welfare how to find work. And if you think, some of my clients probably walk through the door with their pants sagging more than a few, right?
Yep.
And if I would allow that, my reaction in my head to cloud my judgment and how I interacted with them, I would not have given them the same respect and attention that I would have somebody who walked in wearing khakis and a polo shirt, right, or a clean white shirt, ready to work, right?
Mhm.
So, and so it was one of those things where I had some people that were doing everything that everyone asked them to do, which is they were sagging their pants, and so I had this negative thought in my head, and I had to really think about where it came from. My dad was a cop, so he understood what the inside of a prison looked like. So
Mm.
he let me know that's prison wear. Well, that was in 1985.
Times have changed.
2000, 2005, it's a style.
Oh yeah.
2020, it's a style. People wear it like that. If you buy jeans these days, if they're skinny jeans, they're going to sag naturally, right? So
Yep.
I had to I had to consciously think about it, and so the emotional response is, oh man, they're not serious about it, or they're trying to dress like criminals or whatever else it is, right? Trying to be bad or something that they're not. And the rational response is it's a style. It's a style that's not your style, obviously, but it's somebody else's style. They That's how they wanted to dress, and that they're fine in that way. Now, if someone came to me and said, well, could you give me some tips on interviews? Yeah, wear a belt, right? But until somebody right? But it but until somebody asks me specifically, who am I to provide that type of judgment on them? And so
Mhm.
it's a mental thought.
Yep.
I consciously do it. That style. So now it's the
Definitely.
style rather than, oh, they're not serious about life,
Mhm.
which was something that my dad said, that's what you get when you sag your pants. Right. So you see, that's a growth thing. That's
Definitely.
something that I had to learn over time.
Definitely.
And so there's those things all the time where you come across your biases that you think are right or wrong. And those biases are right to you. They're value systems, they're work ethics, those things that people that loved you taught you. So
Yeah.
they can't be wrong.
Yeah.
How are you
And
going to tell me my grandma was wrong? Right.
yeah.
So, you
And
know,
first of all, thank you for sharing that anecdote, Carl. And it's something that I think a lot of people wouldn't be brave enough to share. But
mhm,
you're mentioning to if you can get a belt, get one. And I don't think you even need judgment to do that, because the fact of the matter is there are people that have prejudice and some people that know they have prejudice,
Sure.
but I think the majority don't, and they have that instinctual thought in the back of their head and they go forward with it. And I think that's one thing that hopefully through mindfulness, we can come together as the world. Because, I think I'm up in Canada right now, but, we're seeing the stuff that's going on in the US, and it's a little bit hard to see. And I honestly don't think from the political sides, the people are too different. I honestly think that the majority of them want the best for their kids. They want the best for themselves, their family. And to see so much, anger and argument between them, it's a little bit heartbreaking. And I think if we just realize that we have prejudice, I mean, it's a hard thing to do, right? I mean,
it exists. It exists within us. We're all prejudiced. We all have a bias.
Mm-hmm.
We all have things that we prefer, right? So, and that's really what the bias is. It's what we prefer. Those things that are ingrained in our head, and like I said, that were lessons learned at a younger age.
Mm-hmm.
They are value systems those
Yep.
are tough nut to crack, right? So
Absolutely.
you have people all the time that, first of all, privilege, when people have privilege, most people don't even realize they have privilege or that they're acting within privilege. And so when
Let's go into that.
when you talk about privilege, a lot of people think, a lot of people use it as a weapon. Well, that's just your privilege showing. Well, if you don't explain to that person what privilege is, how are they supposed to know when their privilege is showing? Well, everyone knows what privilege is. We just talked about that for the last, 20 minutes. Not everyone knows, right? Not everyone is exposed to that. If you were from a homogenous community where it was, mostly the same ethnic group, you're going to have customs and culture and the idea of what society is and how it acts and how it interacts with each other. That's going to be different than somebody, I grew up in San Francisco. Maybe there's a different culture in Vancouver or maybe a rural area outside of Vancouver, right? I know there's a big difference between just being in San Francisco and a 2-hour drive up to Mendocino County, up where I live. And so there's different cultures where we grew up and what we're exposed to. And so just recognizing that we have preferences, and when somebody is doing something opposite or that counteracts that preference, it's going to cause us to get into that limbic system. The amygdala is going to send out the fight, flight, or freeze, right? We freeze sometimes too, right? And so that doesn't compute. That doesn't make sense. And I'm really good at holding my tongue, but my face always gives it away.
Oh man, that is a beautiful face right there.
Yeah. So we have that privilege. Another thing to think about is that white privilege is not the only privilege.
For sure.
Right? I don't have white privilege. I mean, I have a white mother, but I was, no one, would ever mistake me for a Caucasian person. I've been called a million different things, but never white. Right. And so just recognizing that, I'm a male, right? I'm cisgendered, right? So, I'm heterosexual, I'm educated, right? And
For sure.
all of those things are privileges. When you look at the other side of the scale, those other folks don't have those advantages that a male might have in society. As a male, I never have to worry about whether or not I'm going to get hired based off of me being pregnant or not.
Definitely.
And I had someone in a hiring panel one time say, "Oh man, she would be great for us, but you know what? She's 5 months pregnant. We're not going to probably see her for 9 months." That would never be a consideration for me. And it shouldn't have been a consideration for her, but it's just one of those things where that's my male privilege. Right?
Absolutely.
And so, but it wasn't something I thought about until that moment.
Definitely. And I think there's two different aspects to this. There's one of even realizing you have privilege. Actually, there's three. There's one realizing you have privilege. There's one assessing, like someone can tell you have privilege, but I'm sure, Carl, you've gone into instances where you say, hey, you might be privileged in this situation. Where it's like, oh, no, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. I had to do X, Y, Z. But then you're like, yeah, you had to do X, Y, Z, but everyone else had to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G to Z to get there, right?
Yeah.
And there was an interesting picture. I'm not sure if you've seen it on social media, but there's like a baseball game and there's one person who's just standing up to see the baseball game. And then there's a little bit shorter person who has to stand on a box. And that's kind of like the handicap. They need to do the same thing. And then equity, exactly.
Equity. Yeah.
And do you mind kind of just giving us a little spiel on equity and why it's important, Carl?
Yeah, sure. So equality means everything is theoretically available to everyone, right? So everyone, has the same access, or no, not the same, but everyone has the idea of freedom and freedom of speech and whatnot. So equity talks about having the same access,
Sure.
right? And so, and you hear people, whenever I talk about privilege, and I do a ton of different seminars on them, and I had one person say, you know what, you keep talking about privilege, I'm a white person, but I grew up in the sticks and I had to fight for everything I had, and both of my parents were this and that, and we didn't have anything, and I slept on the floor. Well, absolutely. And that's an economic privilege, sure. There is economic privilege. People who grew up in middle to high class probably have experienced things, in a more favorable light in terms of society than folks who grew up, hand to mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, or in homes and in the system and on assistance and all those different things. So absolutely, that person who had more money had more privilege than you. But to be a Caucasian male in this society affords you privileges that being not being a Caucasian male doesn't afford you. You have a little bit more access. You have doors that are open to you more naturally
Yeah.
than you would have. Yeah, well, I had to fight with tooth. Yeah, sure, absolutely. You got straight A's. That's cool. And that probably you became the lawyer that you are because of that, right? But
Absolutely.
just think about somebody else who maybe didn't have the access to the schools that you have, or to having somebody at home, or having a tutor, right? Or having, not to have to take the bus home every day or have to walk home every day, And so there's different privileges that could be afforded to people that they
100%.
don't even realize have affected them in a favorable way than other folks. But see, that goes back to thinking about other people,
Yep.
right? And being compassionate towards other folks. The one thing about the masks that people talk about all the time, and what I think a lot of people are missing, is that the mask that you wear protects other people from you.
What do you mean by that?
So when you're wearing a mask, you wearing a mask is not going to keep the virus out 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
We already know
Oh,
that.
okay. The math. I thought you were talking
Yeah,
figuratively.
yeah, no, 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 no.
Okay.
So, but the mask that you're wearing is keeping the spittle and
Yep.
the microbes that are coming out of your mouth from being sprayed everywhere. And how many people are walking around right now infected with the virus that don't even realize they have it?
Yep.
And so that's the challenge, is trying to get people to realize the mask is not to protect you, it's to protect other people. And when other people are doing that and you're doing that, then we're all protected,
Absolutely. And
right?
kind of just to go down this small point, talking
Mm,
about like egos and talking about personalities, I think the unfortunate aspect, like I mentioned earlier, I genuinely think that the difference between, the left and right political affiliations is very
mhm.
minute. And I honestly think the majority of them have very similar interests and most of them are good-hearted. You'll have some evil people here and there, but I honestly think the majority of individuals are very caring and loving. And I think the unfortunate aspect is, like, for example, with the mask issue, like the Democrats were attacking the Republicans for not wearing masks. And maybe it was because of the media that they were getting. Because, social media targets specific things to you based
Sure,
on your political affiliation. They
sure.
don't see anything else. And same with the Democrats. And now they're just fighting. And, if you call someone dumb, you're not going to change their mind. The only
Yeah,
thing they're going to change is that guy's going to throw up his fist, like you're mentioning, throwing it back. The back of your head's firing up, and you're like, I'm going to war. And you have to double
yeah,
down.
yeah,
And I'm sure there are some individuals that have taken the time to reanalyze and change their method because of that. But there are way better ways to do it, such as soft skills,
this goes
such
back
as
to soft skills. Yeah,
everything's connected.
yeah,
I mean, this one issue could have been alleviated by saying that, hey, guys, like, I appreciate you. I understand you. Like, let's work together. Like, we're in this together. Like, the whole world's in this together, like the
yeah,
US, Canada, everyone's in this together. And we should really get together at a, fundamental level. And, we have this virus right now, regardless of how it came in or whose fault it is. This is a situation we're in right now.
right.
We can work together and go forward, or we can butt heads and make this process 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
I really feel that if people would say, what, wearing a mask will help you in this way, will help us in this way, and I would definitely appreciate if you were to do that, rather than, you're not wearing a mask, you're stupid, like you
Mm,
mentioned. When you call someone names, all you're doing is getting them into fight mode or flight mode, or,
yeah,
they're going to shut down, or they're going to argue with you, and they're going to, whatever that is, they stop listening.
absolutely.
And so it goes back to what we're talking about, to be able to better connect with people. there are certain ways that probably are better, how to communicate that message to other people, right? Always telling somebody that they're wrong. It's the difference between telling a child that they're bad and that the behavior that they're doing is bad, right?
Hmm.
Because they can correct the behavior. But if you keep telling them that they're bad, that's who they are. They start
Yep.
wearing that, right? So, you have a bunch of folks, and I wish everyone thought like me, acted like me, and believed in what I thought, and everyone. But I also realize that different people have different backgrounds. They have different educational backgrounds. They have different experiences, and they're hearing different
Sure.
information from different places because our media is so polarized these days. So,
Yeah.
and so it's one of those things. I read a meme on, I can't, Facebook or Instagram the other
Yeah.
day, and it said, I wish there are times I wish I didn't understand psychology as well as I do, so I could really be outraged. So it's one of those things where I don't, my first response is frustration, anger, outrage, and then rationally it's, how do I connect with them? How do I get them to see that? And we're not
Absolutely.
going to see eye to eye when we're calling each other stupid or
Other
commies
names.
or snowflakes or anything else that people want to say. It's just their emotional way of communicating. And I wish more people were more exposed to those reactions that we communicate. They're not the most productive ways of getting your point across.
Absolutely. And it's I think let's go back. I think it kind of relates to what do I want to do? Because I think when we see something that we don't like, especially when it's politicized and, you know, to a high degree, it's very easy for us to just lash out, right? But let's go back to even like good parenting skills. Like, what do? You talk to your kid and then you're like, hey, okay, what happened? Okay, what did you think? Because like there may be an instance where the child, I don't know, stole a toy from Toys R Us or something,
Yeah.
but they might just not understand that they can do that. Or maybe they were saying, oh, I just wanted to borrow it and bring it back. It'd be okay. I don't know. I do that at my friend's house, so I could do it here. And maybe it's just a genuine piece of small understanding.
Yeah.
But if the parent was supposed to get angry with that child, then they would maybe do it behind their backs. And, that just decays the trust, that decays the conversation, that could decays so much more. You're literally throwing, what's it called? Fire on the bridge,
Yeah.
collapsing that permanently rather than just saying, okay, there's a step missing. Let's put on a step, nail it in and make it stronger. And yeah, Carl, I think that's such a key point that you mentioned, just talking, understanding, going from a place of compassion. I mean, I guess what is the one type of communication that you think would really benefit individuals at large? There's obvious differences, but if you had to get the best bang for your buck, what would you say right now? Very deep and hard question, so feel free to skip if you like.
I no, I think one of the gifts of and I say gifts, people are dying, right? But one of the gifts of this whole situation this year is that people are rediscovering opportunities to communicate face to face, not in person, but over Zoom, right? And
Mhm.
if you listen to a lot of there's stats that say Gen Z, right? Folks that are, what, 11 to 23, right, in that age group, they actually prefer face to face communication as much
Really?
as, yeah. And a lot of it's because they've had face to face communication from their phones, right? They can Skype, they can Snapchat, you have all those different Slack, Zoom, right? They have all these different ways, these platforms that they can use to have that face-to-face conversation. When they're gaming, they can put their picture up if they want to, right? You can see
Sure.
people, and it was something that wasn't necessarily native technically. We know us, Gen Xers and millennials, that wasn't always native to our experience. The only way that we could communicate face-to-face was if we were face-to-face with somebody else or over a WebEx conference call in a big building. But now everyone has a phone where they can just have a intimate face-to-face conversation where you see people's eyes, you see their face, you see their reactions, you see their shoulders, right? Stressed, not stressed, right? You
Yeah.
can see that they're with you, right? That they are in the moment, that they are practicing mindfulness when they're talking to you, right? You're the only thing in the world that matters to them, and so like you said, having that conversation with that guy, and he said, "Wow, this is a great conversation." He did most of the talking because he probably thinks that you made him feel like he was the only thing in the world that was that important at that moment, right?
Absolutely.
And how often do any of us get that opportunity to
Do
really feel
how
like,
do we even get that? Like I'm sure there's some people that don't,
no,
you know?
no. So how do we create those? So the face-to-face conversation, real-time conversation where we can see reactions. I mean, I love texting. I'm naturally I'm an introvert. So when
Mm,
I get a text or an email, I can think about the appropriate way to say things and how I want my Facebook is all, it's all manufactured, just like everyone else, right? I put pictures up that I want, and I
sure.
don't do TMI, but I'll definitely do funny things, and then I'll let people know what I want them to know, right? Face to
Mhm.
face, real time, you can't always do that, right?
Absolutely.
You
Y
know,
y
you are real, and a lot of the genuine emotions and reactions come out, and people it helps people to respond to you better, and also helps them to see the repercussions of their communication styles. So if I say things bluntly, if I step over toes, you're gonna, if you say something that's gonna offend me or hurt me, or I'm a little puzzled, I'm not sure, right? Right? You see that in real time. Oh, did I
Mhm.
say something wrong? Right? How often do we get that with a
Sure,
text or an email?
sure. We don't.
Yeah.
Well, at least currently. We'll see what happens in, like, 10 years with technology. It's going
Yeah,
too
really.
fast. It's going too fast. Your
Yeah.
genetic
Well,
code's gonna be there, I swear.
yeah. No, no, absolutely. Yeah, no. Well, yeah, all we're gonna have to do is touch our screen, and our DNA will pop up, and we'll detect
Just
things.
just make a
Yeah.
Carl copy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you see it in how people when they respond to stuff on social media with memes and
Mhm.
gifs, right? Those are um, representations, people's faces, right? Reactions to things, even if they're not ours, that are showing people this is kind of how I feel. Emojis can kind of do that. I wish there was a few more of those response emojis, because the difference between sad and upset. There's one that I want where it's just shake my head. Just I read a lot of stuff, and I'm just like, really? And I wish there was that emoji. There isn't that emoji, right?
Oh,
And
man.
and and I feel bad if I took a picture and just showed people, really, this is how I'm feeling about that right now. So
I love that. Oh, man. And, Carl, have you heard of, mirror neurons by any chance?
explain to me.
So mirror neurons are essentially neurons in our brain that when we see someone doing something, it can
Hmm.
actually give us the same feeling. And I'm not sure if it's with thinking as well, but,
Yeah.
like, for example, if you smile, like, I kind of get that feeling in my own body, and I think that's a huge part of it, like, not only
Hmm.
just seeing the reactions, but, like, if we can feel that aspect of it, it really changes our behavior, and I think that's one of the hardships with, the whole lockdown business worldwide. It's like we can't get that, and you have to go out of your way to, um,
Manufactured. Yeah.
manufacture it, even
Yeah.
contacting people to talk, like, a lot of people are busy. A lot of people have other stuff going on, and it's hard to find that. And if you went to work, usually you'd bump into people at the water cooler. Oh, hey, how's it going? All that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
But now you have to take that additional step. And I think just talking about this one fact, I think if our viewers can, take that time to like plan a weekly call with one of their good friends, just discuss how your day is going. It makes a big difference. And I think, are you familiar with Jordan Peterson by any chance, Carl?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
was watching one of his videos and he was mentioning that, if you get a partner in life, you need to get a partner not that you have like a fall in love fantasy and all that, but you need someone that you can go through life because life is hard. It's not that easy slope and it's a personal process for everyone, ups and
Mhm.
downs, but you need someone where you can talk to them about your day. And if you can't do that or if you feel intimidated, because there are relationships like that where it's very, button heads and all
Sure.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
if you get that, that's what's going to make you thrive. And I think that's such an important lesson to be able to talk to people, to make that time out, because oftentimes we're very busy with work. We're very busy with the stresses in our life from finances to everything in the middle.
Hmm.
So I think that's a very important thing. And I think with that said, Carl, before we go into closing statements, is there anything in particular that I didn't ask you about that you think you'd like to share with our viewers before going on to the final message and having your social media and shout outs and all that kind of jazz given?
No. But just to piggyback off what you were just saying, we were
Sure.
talking about the mirror neurons. There's a concept called reflective listening,
What's that?
It's a similar to active listening. It's actually, I believe it's a component of effective active listening,
Sure.
where when you're listening to somebody, if they're excited about something, you show excitement, you show interest. If they're
Huge.
upset about something, you show concern, right? And so to do that, you have to be mindful. You have to be in the moment with that person. You have to be using what's called tuning into yourself,
Hmm.
right? And when you're tuning into yourself, it's from the Helping Professional curriculum that the state of Pennsylvania came out with about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And they they talk about when you're preparing for a meeting with the customer, in human services, a meeting with the client, right? Or a meeting with a patient, a meeting with your coworker, with your parents. If you know that person, if you've established some type of relationship, think about, how do you feel going into that conversation? Is there something that you're always going to butt heads about? Was the last conversation you guys had, a positive one? Is that you're looking forward to seeing that person? Was the last one contentious? You feel like you need to clean something up? Maybe it's the very first time you've met somebody, and maybe you're shy, right? As an introvert, if I'm in an elevator with somebody else, I'm usually looking up at the numbers, hoping to get to my floor without having to say anything, unless they say something back to me,
Sure.
right? And then if they ask me a question, I can give them an answer. You talked to Joe Gray a couple weeks ago. I'm sure he gave you a 2-hour answer on home gyms. He's passionate about that, but he's very much an introvert, right? But that's something that, he's one of my best friends in the world, but he's not always going to initiate conversation. But when the conversation gets rolling, he's just as good as any extrovert out there. It's just introverts are counterpunchers, right? But because of that, they are listening and they're paying attention. And so to be intentional in that reflective listening, where you're really, showing that person, I'm here and I'm trying to be as empathetic as possible. So
That's
that's
huge.
yeah, it's very much
Yeah.
what you were talking about. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the amount of soft skill knowledge we got through this episode, Carl. Wow.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that.
no, 100%. With that said, Carl, I mean, we have a usual segment where individuals give out their one message to the audience, and this is intentionally broad. It doesn't necessarily have to be about what we talked about. It can be about anything that popped up in your brain right now or that you thought of. What would be your one message?
But as human beings, we have more in common than we don't have in common. We all have emotions. We all feel love. We all feel shame. We all get stressed out. We all get happy. To recognize that at the end of the day, most people's motivation is to get through the day in a positive way. And if we can recognize that, and that very few people are really trying to get over on you and that have a negative agenda, right? Which may sound Pollyannish to some people. Some people may say, oh, well, okay, whatever. Trust me. I mean, I grew up street smart. And what I can tell you is most of the people have good intentions.
Mm,
And if you can get past the bluster, get past the rhetoric, get past, the talking points, and you get down to somebody as a human being and what gets them to smile, if we
wow.
can connect with them in that way, there's so many more things we can do to connect with them. Can I tell a real quick story, Paul?
Absolutely.
So I play tennis, and I play tennis a couple times a week. I'm in a league, and I have my tennis partner. We've been partners for about 5 years, and he's really nice guy, and he's in his 60s, but he's really fit. He was a special forces guy in the army, and
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, and he's a
That's
construction
quite
foreman,
a
and
competitor.
yeah, right. Um, so the more we played a lot. Well, he's more conservative, in his views than I am. I'm a little more liberal, but we play golf together too sometimes. And last time he came out in a hat that said "Gun Owners for Trump," and he wore it without any irony, and he just wore it. And it was something that I just thought back to all, and I said, does that change who that person is? I had a negative thought for, like, the first 5 minutes. I'm gonna beat this gun owner for Trump, right? Blah 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 in my head. But then we just went through the 18 rounds. We had, I mean, the 18 holes, went through a round. We had a blast. We smoked cigars, had beers, talked about the things that we had in common, our kids. And he's a wonderful man. And he is a blessing to my life to know somebody like him. And I have a few other people that I play tennis with that are very much like that, very conservative. But, at the end of the day, we enjoy each other's company. We can go have a beer, and because we're human beings. And once you get to the human aspect of, there's things that make us laugh, there's things that make us sad, but we all want to end the day in a good way. I think we can
Absolutely.
get past some of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing story. And that's the way that I think everyone should go about it. I think in politics, especially in the States, it's very like, oh, you're conservative. Okay, I'm not even talking to you. Oh, you're
Yeah.
liberal. Oh, I'm not even talking about you. And it's such a shame because when you label someone as just one thing, it just throws away all their value out the door. And even for people who are conservative, did you ask why they're conservative? Are you just assuming that they're this? Are you assuming that liberals are just this? And it's easy to do that, and I think that's why
Mhm.
people judge, and that's why people discriminate, because it's the first thing that pops up. There's very low effort, and it's easy to do, and it takes conscious action, like you were mentioning. Got to
Mhm.
activate that brain. Gotta be like, okay, we had that thought. Why am
Yeah.
I having that thought? Okay, that's why I'm having that thought. Let's go forward. But you change your life from that, and maybe there's some aspects of being a Republican that you do agree with, and maybe that's going to change the way that you act in the world. And
Yeah.
it just by having that diversity in your life, you get more compassion because you get more experiences through the conversations of your amazing soft skills, Carl.
Right.
And, it just makes the world a better place.
Yeah.
Um,
I had
yeah,
a friend. I had a friend who, on Facebook, I was telling a story. I said something about, oh, he wanted to cancel somebody, and I said, well, I've got friends that I hang out with that are conservative, that have totally different views than me, and and we have. And he said, well, if you have, oh no, cops. I said, I know. I went to school with cops. In high school with cops, and I have cops in my family, and some of them I love to death. Oh, you should cancel them. I said, why? He said, just because they're a cop, or just because they agree with somebody else. I said, if I cancel them, they may not have a friend like me that has access to them, that can help them see the other perspective. 75% of Caucasian Americans do not have a regular relationship with an African American in this country.
really?
Yes.
Wow.
And a regular relationship, like coming over for barbecues, watching football games together, hanging out, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And it's I think the number's 55% for Hispanic Americans, with Caucasian Americans with Hispanic Americans with relationships.
Wow.
And I really think if you don't have exposure to somebody else, you're going to get exposure from what you see on TV, right? In the 80s and 90s, most black and brown people on TV or in the movies were criminals or superheroes, right? And so larger than life, or negative. So a lot of people had that idea of folks are dangerous, they're scary,
Hmm.
right? And if you have not been exposed to somebody who is not dangerous or scary, and is a human being, a single dad with, three marriages, and working hard, and going to, working two jobs while they're finishing their PhD and everything else like that, and realize that people live their lives in the same way that you do, and have emotions just like you do, and have motivations just like you do, then you're going to believe what you believe. See, 60%, I think the number 60% of
That's
people that
crazy.
are on welfare work 20 to 25 hours a week, that they receive food stamps, right?
Yeah.
How many people think that the majority of the people that are on food stamps work? That's not what you hear in our culture,
No. And
right?
that just goes back to the media. It's the media portraying certain individuals as certain things, which is really unfortunate.
Well, you
And
got to make money somehow, right? So, and
I
it's
don't know.
insidious. It's
Yeah.
insidious. It
Yeah.
is. I shouldn't think of it
Yeah.
lightly, but if,
Yeah.
we rise above and we think about how we feel about things, and do we have access to somebody? And I tell people I'm an open book. I have a lot of friends who are black that do not want to have those conversations with their white friends. I don't want to be the one explaining things to you. I get it, but I tell people, if you have any questions, come and ask me. My job is an educator. That's what I do for a living, and so I'm not going to stop being an educator just because I don't agree with you socially,
Sure.
right? Or that we don't have the same idea. How do we get the same idea? We enlighten each other.
Enlighten each other.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's awesome, Carl. And I think, you know what? We explored so many topics today, from communication, from diversity, in so many different realms of life, from, where you're born, your ethnicity, financial diversity. And we talked about privilege. We talked about the fact of, some people have a little bit easier time in certain things compared to others. And we talked about the hardships of breaking away from our ego and
Mhm.
realizing that, maybe some things aren't the way that we've seen. We talked about the fact that we may have an emotional response based on, the first part of a life and our experiences there. But we talked about how to make amends and rise forward in our own personal process. I had a lot of fun this episode, and I learned a lot. I got to revisit a lot of cool topics that I really enjoyed. And yeah, go ahead.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, okay. Last
One
one.
more thing. Yeah, okay. So just to be clear with the privilege, right? So a lot of people don't recognize the privilege that they have, right? And also, once the privilege is recognized, it's not there for you to feel guilty or bad
Huge.
about the situation. You do not need to feel guilty. Black people do not need you to feel guilty. We're not going to pay our bills because you feel more guilty, right? So we're not going to money off that. We're not going to be able to live our lives off that. And so a lot of folks just want that understanding of, this is the door we need to open. So there's no guilt or feeling bad about it. What there is opportunity to act and make the situation better. So I just wanted to clear that up and make sure that we talked about that. I don't blame anybody for having privilege, and it's not
And you
your fault.
shouldn't blame yourself.
And it's not your fault that you have privilege. These are things
Absolutely.
that have been given to you without your consent. But
Absolutely.
Once it's recognized, now there's something we can do about it. So I just want to make sure
Absolutely.
that was clear.
That's a great point that you mentioned. The cards that you're given in life are out of your control, whether, whatever your ethnicity is, whatever color you are, whether you have curly hair or whether you have straight hair, whether you have a mustache. I guess that's kind of a little bit on you if you decide to shave it off or not. But, like, the cards are dealt in
mustaches, yeah.
but it's the cards that you're dealt with in life out of your hands. How you play them and how you react to others and how they're playing their cards, that's your call. And what you choose to do in there, that's on you, and that's the impact you can make on the world or take away from the world.
Yep.
So we're the dealers, and we just dealt you your cards. What are you going to do? Awesome. I think on that note, Carl, what are your shout outs? Where can people find you? And yeah.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on I have a personal Facebook page. It's irreverent, and sometimes other people's wisdom I share on Facebook. But I have an Instagram. Mostly it's concerts I go to. I go to concerts as much as I can, when the world opens back up, and just videos from that. I'm sure I'm probably getting in trouble for that one day, but Carl Rabun, yeah, if you want to reach out to me, LinkedIn is a great place. Facebook is a great place. I'm in a band called Empty Wagon. We play here in the Sacramento area, and we're open to other things, and it's a lot of fun. And I thank you for having me, and I really appreciate being able to share my views on life.
Absolutely. And for those of you considering to listen to Carl, I did check out his music last night, and this man has an amazing voice. So definitely give it a listen, and all about good vibes, some a little bit kind of going back. So we're away from, that mainstream, new techno kind of stuff, but bringing back the guitar, bringing it back to the vocals and all that good stuff from there.
Funk and R&B. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, with that said, Carl, thank you again for coming on to the Personal Process Podcast, for sharing your life story, and for giving us so much value and unique insight into your life, your personal life, and the lessons that you've learned going to today. With
It's
that
my
being,
pleasure.
yeah, thank you again. And with that being said, sir, we'll go on to our outro. Thank you for everyone who's viewed and listened to this episode. All the best.
And be well and be safe.
Be well and be safe. Hey, everyone. I'm back after another amazing episode with another amazing guest. We hope we added value into your life so you could take the tips from this episode and fuel your process forward. If you enjoyed our episode today and think other friends or family members may also appreciate the lessons that our podcast brings, be sure to share us with them. Subscribe and rate our show so we know how we did. And always remember, trust the process.